You guys, this Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni situation just keeps getting worse. Every single day, I feel like there is something new being said about what is going on between them. And Hollywood is standing behind Blake in this situation. A lot of the It Ends With Us cast, including Colleen Hoover, has come out to show their support to Blake. And everyone is urging those online to read the complaint before commenting on the situation. And I've read through it, and I certainly think that it is very eye-opening. This definitely shows that there is a lot of layers to this story here, and I wanted to just make a video breaking down some of the craziest things that I found were in the complaint that I have not seen get talked about a lot in the press. So we are going to go through some of the things that I feel like we need to talk about. The lawsuit between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has taken Hollywood by storm, with headlines dominated by the biggest allegations, but there are so many wild details in the complaint that have flown under the radar. Like, seriously, some of these things that I've read, I'm like, wait, what? One of the first things that we're going to be talking about in the complaint is this list of demands that Blake had when they returned to filming after the strike. So if you guys have no idea what I'm talking about here, basically It Ends With Us was filming and then there was a strike. So they had to pause filming and they resumed filming in January. At this time, there was this big all hands on deck meeting where Blake had these demands that she wanted put in place, signed by the main players involved in this film. I'm talking Justin Baldoni included, in order to create a safer environment for everyone on set, not just her, okay? And in the complaint, we get to read these list of demands. It says in the complaint that Blake wasn't the only one who spoke up about concerns on set. As the complaint wrote, the concerns she raised were not only for herself, but for the other female cast and crew, some of whom had also spoken up. The January 4th meeting occurred only after Wayfarer had rebuffed Lively's efforts repeatedly. One of the demands that went around included no more mention by Mr. Baldoni of him speaking to Blake Lively's dead father. Now, this is just wild. It definitely makes you think, and I will say we are going to get into the context of this, but when I first heard about Justin not being able to talk about Blake's dad anymore, I was quite confused because I heard about it through TMZ, who wrote, among those demands, no more showing nude videos or images of women to Blake, no more mention of Baldoni's alleged previous addiction, no more discussions about intimate conquests in front of Blake and others, no further mentions of cast and crew's privates, no more inquiries about Blake's weight, and no further mentions of Blake's dead father. Now, like I said, when I read this, it definitely seemed weird because it was written with like no context to that, but in the complaint, we do find out what the context is. It says, Mr. Baldoni engaged in other behaviors that were shocking and emotionally distressing. For example, he claimed he could speak to the dead and on several occasions told her that he had spoken to her dead father. It was off-putting and violative for Mr. Baldoni to claim a personal relationship with her recently deceased father. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath were also constantly hugging and touching cast and crew. When Miss Lively or others avoided this touching, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath would retaliate by becoming irritated, cold, and uncollaborative. The result was an unwelcoming and mercurial environment for Miss Lively, her employees, and others on set. I mean, to claim that he had a relationship with her deceased father, like, that is just weird. Now, something else mentioned in the complaint that was pretty crazy is this one that I mentioned in my last video, but it's still just so shocking, I will mention it again. But Justin's PR crisis manager, Melissa Nathan, has a sister who wrote articles about this feud, and in text messages referenced in the complaint, we can see Melissa Nathan text Justin's publicist Jennifer Abel about talking to her sister Sarah Nathan, who's a journalist. The complaint reads, on August 9th, 2024, Miss Nathan indicated to Miss Abel that she was on the phone with her sister Sarah Nathan, a journalist at the New York Post and contributor at Page 6, and remarked that Mr. Baldoni's religion should be taken out from media coverage. She went on to state, and mostly, the misogynistic. Later the same day, Miss Nathan texted Miss Abel a link of an article on Page 6 by Sarah Nathan entitled, Truth Behind It Ends With Us Feud Rumors. Justin Baldoni made Blake Lively uncomfortable, sources say, stating, I knew she would keep uncomfortable. On August 9, 2024, Miss Abel and Miss Nathan discussed suppressing two stories that report Miss Lively was uncomfortable on the set. Miss Nathan texted, all press is so overwhelming. We've confused people, so much mixed messaging. It's actually really funny if you think about it. Them mentioning they chose to keep out Justin's religion from the stories is interesting now that we can read about how he was saying that he could speak to her dad and had a relationship with him. Like, they really just did not want that part about him to get out, because it's definitely something that would make him seem really off. Now, the other demands from Blake of what she was requesting to be changed on set when they resumed filming after the strike definitely makes you think about what was going on before, because it certainly sounds uncomfortable if you have to ask for these things. It definitely makes you think that these things were happening, you know? So number 13, no more improvising of kissing. All intimate touch must be choreographed in advance with Blake Lively and an intimacy coordinator. No biting or sucking of lip without Blake Lively consent, and all intimate on-camera touch and conversations must be in character, not spoken from Mr. Baldoni to Blake Lively personally. 15, all actors participating with Blake Lively in intimate scenes involving her being in any state of nudity or stimulated nudity must be classified as active working actors, not friends of the director or producers, and must be approved by Blake Lively. Number 19, no monitors to be viewed or accessible on set or remotely during closed set scenes except by Blake Lively approved essential crew and personnel. 20, no more entering, attempting to enter, interrupting, pressuring, or asking Blake Lively to enter her trailer or the makeup trailer by Mr. Heath or Mr. Baldoni while she is nude for any reason. 21, no more private, multi-hour meetings in Blake Lively's trailer with Mr. Baldoni crying with no outside Blake Lively appointed representative to monitor. 22, no more pressing by Mr. Baldoni to sage any of Blake Lively's employees. In the complaint, you can also read about the improvised kisses that she was uncomfortable with, as the complaint wrote, without these protections in place, Mr. Baldoni improvised physical intimacy that had not been rehearsed, choreographed, or discussed with Miss Lively, with no intimacy coordinator involved. For instance, Mr. Baldoni discreetly bit and sucked on Miss Lively's lower lip during a scene in which he improvised numerous kisses on each take. Mr. Baldoni insisted on shooting the full scene over and over again, well beyond what would have been required on an ordinary set and without advance notice or consent. On another occasion, Mr. Baldoni and Miss Lively were filming a slow dance scene for a montage in which no sound was recorded. Mr. Baldoni chose to let the camera roll and have them perform the scene, but did not act in character as Ryle. Instead, he spoke to Miss Lively out of character as himself. At one point, he leaned forward and slowly dragged his lips from her ear and down her neck as he said, "It smells so good." None of this was remotely in character or based on any dialogue in the script, and nothing needed to be said because, again, there was no sound. Mr. Baldoni was caressing Miss Lively with his mouth in a way that had nothing to do with their roles. When Miss Lively later objected to this behavior, Mr. Baldoni's response was, "I'm not even attracted to you." Now, there was also mentions of how Justin wanted the birth scene to be shot in the film. On the day of shooting the scene in which Miss Lively's character gives birth, Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath suddenly pressured Miss Lively to stimulate full nudity. Despite no mention of nudity for the scene in the script, her contract, or in previous creative discussions, Mr. Baldoni insisted to Miss Lively that women give birth naked and that his wife had ripped her clothes off during labor. He claimed it was not normal for women to remain in their hospital gowns while giving birth. Miss Lively disagreed, but felt forced into a compromise that she would be naked from below the chest down. When the birth scene was filmed, the set was chaotic, crowded, and utterly lacking in standard industry protections for filming nude scenes, such as choreographing the scene with an intimacy coordinator, having a signed nudity writer, or simply turning off the monitors so the scene was not broadcast to all crew on set and their personal phones and iPad. Mr. Heath and Mr. Baldoni also failed to close the set, allowing non-essential crew to pass through while Miss Lively was mostly nude with her legs spread wide in stirrups and only a small piece of fabric covering her you-know-what. Among the non-essential persons present that day was Wayfarer co-chairman Mr. Swartz, who flew in for one of his few set visits. Miss Lively was not provided with anything to cover herself between takes until after she had made multiple requests. Miss Lively became even more alarmed when Mr. Baldoni introduced his best friend to play the role of the OBGYN, when ordinarily a small role of this nature would be filled by a local actor. Miss Lively felt that the section of Mr. Mr. Baldoni's friend for this intimate role in which the actor's face and hands were in close proximity to her, you know what, for a birth scene, was invasive and humiliating. The complaint also details more information about what went on the set and how Justin made people uncomfortable. As the complaint read, Mr. Baldoni often referred to women in the workplace as sexy. When they expressed discomfort, Mr. Baldoni would deflect or try to pass it off, which undermined Miss Lively and others' concerns. For example, on one occasion that Miss Lively observed, he told a female cast member that her leather pants looked sexy when she arrived to the set. When she rebuffed his comment because she was uncomfortable, rather than apologizing, he brushed it off with, "I can say that because my wife is here today." Miss Lively felt embarrassed witnessing this kind of commentary, as did others. Now, something else brought up is the weight shaming comment, because when this was first reported on, people thought that the way that it was written, it seemed kind of justified for Justin to be asking this question. As TMZ wrote, sources with direct knowledge tell TMZ there was a scene in which Justin lifts Blake into the air. According to our sources, Justin has a history of back problems, and before lifting Blake, he went to his on-set trainer and asked how much she weighed and how he could train to protect his back from injury. But in the complaint, we hear about the situation saying Mr. Baldoni also routinely degraded Miss Lively by finding back-channel ways of criticizing her body and weight. A few weeks before filming began, and less than 4 months after Miss Lively had given birth to her 4th child, Miss Lively was humiliated to learn that Mr. Baldoni secretly called her fitness trainer without her knowledge or permission and implied that he wanted her to lose weight in 2 weeks. Mr. Baldoni told the trainer that he had asked because he was concerned about having to pick Miss Lively up in a scene for the movie, but there was no such scene. In another scenario, when Miss Lively caught strep throat, Mr. Baldoni offered as a gift to connect her with an expert he had on retainer to help her with probiotics in combat sickness. When Miss Lively went to fill out the privacy forms, she saw the expert was not what Mr. Baldoni had represented her to be, but was instead a weight loss specialist. Miss Lively felt once again that Mr. Baldoni was shaming her for her body and weight. The whole situation, you guys, is just a lot different than what was reported publicly, and this seems to be what Blake is also suing over, the fact that Justin and his team took alleged measures to ruin her image in an attempt to save him from these HR complaints coming out. And I want to just say that, there's a lot of people that say that she ruined her own reputation, or, they still think that she's a mean girl or that she's a bee. But I do think that what is written in this complaint is very different than, her being mean in an interview. Like, she could be mean in an interview, but these things could also have happened, Two things can be true at the same time. And I think that is a very important thing to keep in mind when you are reading through this complaint and you are thinking about this situation in particular. But I want to know what you guys think about all of these claims made in the complaint. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will keep you guys updated on what goes on in this case. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye, guys.